So my book is called Life Penalty by Joy Fielding, and it's about a woman named Gail who loses her 6-year-old daughter to someone who raped and murdered her, and now this book is all about how she's overcoming this and how she's trying to find the killer for revenge on this. And she's devoting her life, and it's ruining her friendships, her family relationships, and her mental state, and it's all about how she's trying to overcome this situation.
So the book that I read for my CU was Born to Crime by Trevor Noah. So it's an autobiography about his life, and it just talks about all of the issues that he had to deal with while growing up because he is a mixed child in South Africa during apartheid. So that was when racial segregation was still going on, and life was really hard for him. And I felt like that was what made the book really interesting, and everything that happens in the book centralizes on that because apartheid does end, but the issues and the long-lasting effects are always there. And I'd say that the themes of the book centralize about abuse, strength, and love.
Right, so the book is called Women Talking, and it's a novel by Miriam Taves. It's a well-written novel about a sensitive topic. The book gives a voice to the women of a remote Mennonite colony in Bolivia who are illiterate as a result of their religion's doctrine which subjugates women. In this novel, the women spend an exhausting 48 hours discussing whether they should forgive their attackers and stay in the colony or flee the colony to prevent further attacks.
Okay, so the book I chose is The Kite Runner, and it's a story about friendship, and it's also about leaving one's homeland and the loss of a country and a family, but also trying to find yourself. And the main character, the protagonist, Amir, he has a lot of questions about the past, and he's very self-reflective, and he has a tense relationship with his father. The story has an absence of women throughout, and so it's really about the male characters and their relationships and the dynamics between them.
So 1984 is a book written by George Orwell that takes place in, exactly as it sounds, the year 1984 in a fictional world called Oceania. In this fictional world, there is a political party in power called The Party, and it is led by somebody named Big Brother. Big Brother and the party control everything in this universe. They control all thoughts, all emotions, so much so that nobody is allowed to even commit a crime by thinking about the crime. And so the book follows one character in particular, Winston, as he struggles against the confines of this very rigid totalitarian society.
So Educated is a memoir by Tara Westover, and it gives an account of her life growing up in Idaho with her Mormon family, and ultimately you discover that she does not set foot in school until she goes to university at Brigham Young, and she had to educate herself, like teach herself math and English in order to pass a competency test to get accepted to that university.
The book, The Bell Jar, is about main character Esther Greenwood, and basically she wins a scholarship to a local college from living a poor life for all her life. She gets all these opportunities. She wins a fashion contest to New York, and throughout the entire book she describes that she feels an empty feeling throughout the entire book, which kind of hints towards her mental illness.
The readability of this book, I would definitely say it's about a medium. It's not very hard, it's not very easy as well, but it is an intermediate level for sensitivity and emotional cues because it is a hard book regarding the topics that it states, and it could be a very emotional ride for some readers if they're not comfortable with it.
So I'd say that the book has medium difficulty when it comes to readability. The reason why I say that is because the content that goes on is pretty easy to grasp and understand, but the language being used does get confusing at times because they talk about a lot of the things that happened back in South Africa at the time, and it does get a little tricky to understand. But besides from that, it's very straightforward and easy to understand.
There is a lot of dialogue which makes it shorter and easier to read, and the vocabulary is not confusing. If there are parts that are people don't have a background in, like the history of the colony, or if you don't understand what a Mennonite colony is, they do go into an explanation or a background of it. So it does a really good job of laying it out for a reader who may have no background understanding.
So the novel is a fairly easy read. I'd say an easy to medium read. It's quite descriptive in parts, and there's lots of symbolism in the novel, it makes the novel interesting. Although the plot is quite linear, there is some movement into the future, and then also some flashbacks as well. So it's not a completely linear plot, but it's easy to understand. And even though there's some internal dialogue and self-reflection in the novel, it's quite plot driven as well.
So I would say that this book definitely is more difficult from a readability perspective, just because of the types of words that the party in the book has put in place in this community. So it requires a certain level, high level of reading to be able to decode almost like a secondary language.
Okay, so the readability of the novel, I would say, is easy to medium. The story unfolds chronologically, so basically from when she's a young child to when she's an adult. There are times when she does remember things, so you do go to jump to the past in some situations, but it's not difficult to follow what's happening at all. And the language used is fairly straightforward. I don't think anybody would have difficulty with the vocabulary.
So I would say personally that the book was a medium kind of reading difficulty, because the time that this book was set was a while ago, around the 1960s, so the words that they use, the vocabulary kind of was from the older times, so more modern society nowadays wouldn't really understand, but the book is still pretty understandable. You can get through it.
Regarding the assignment associated with this book, I would say it was pretty easy to fill it out because of the topics it deals with, since it connects to modern day society in great ways. So it's easy to relate it back to what we're doing and how it affects us in modern day world, even though it takes place in the 1980s.
So I'd say that the book definitely does suit the CU, and that's because the CU basically, its purpose is to expand your knowledge on a social issue, and in this book there are definitely many social issues that are easy to find and that you can definitely talk about, like for example racism, social injustice, that happens so much. So that's why I definitely recommend this book for the CU, and it definitely does suit it.
So the assignment is on social issues. I would say there are a plethora of social issues in the book. Certainly a lot that you could pick from. You could talk about the subjugation of women within a religious colony. You could talk about literacy issues as a result of subjugation. You could talk about the violence that occurred towards these women and the violence against women in general on a global scale, and this just being an example of one.
So I think this book is a really good choice for the culminating unit. It has a social issues. There are some clear social issues in terms of the website that you need to create. The book focuses a lot on power and privilege and class struggles. So in terms of making connections, whether it's here or overseas, there are lots of connections that you could make for certainly the website and the awareness campaign.
So this book definitely has a lot of social issues in it that would make completing the assignment for the grade 11 course, I think, fairly simple or fairly straightforward. The book talks about issues like powerful governments and how they control their people, themes of oppression, violence, and how we might struggle as a society to try to overcome or overthrow these particular governments.
Okay, so this book is new on the book list this year, so there haven't been students that have done this book previously, but I don't think that there would be any issue writing an essay with the book. There are a lot of topics that you could choose from, and as far as the final CU assignment, there are several social issues that you could pick from. Anything to do with, for example, education would be obviously a big one, but you could also look at family relationships and how sometimes family relationships are dysfunctional and that parents don't always make the best decisions for their children.
Why I recommend this book is because it definitely keeps the reader and the audience really motivated and into it, because it has a lot of details and a lot of mystery going along with it, trying to figure out who the killer is and how she's going to get there. So it really keeps the reader on their toes and makes them want more.
So what I like best about the book is that it's very raw. Like, because it is his real life. It's an autobiography. So you get, but it's very detailed too. So you get all of the gripping details that happen, and it's just a very powerful book. And it does get sad at times, but there is a lot of humor in it that makes it funny, and it cracks me up a bit. So that's why I loved it, and that's definitely why I recommend it for you guys.
A couple of things that I liked best. I had never heard of Manitoba Colony or what had happened, so this prompted me to do some further reading on the subject. So that in itself was good. There's further learning on my part. The other thing that I really liked about it was that it's such a sensitive subject matter, and usually I'm very, very squeamish about sensitive subject matters. I tend to say, okay, I don't really want to read that. I don't want to think about that. It's really sad, but it was written in such a way that I honestly could not put the novel down. I think I read it in a day. It's that good.
So the book focuses on male relationships and male characters, and it shows a sensitive side of masculinity, which we don't always see in literature, or we're starting to see more of it, but it also shows a very toxic masculinity as well. And so that contrast, I think, is interesting to see, and it shows how Amir, the main character, he has to he's always living up to his father's expectations of him, and his father seems disappointed because he's not as athletic or stereotypically the type of boy or man that he wants him to be. But Amir tries to find himself in his identity despite that. And then some of the characters, especially the antagonist, who demonstrates the toxic masculinity, it shows really the impact not only to Amir and his family, but really to society as well. And so what I like about the book is that it shows that it doesn't, there are different ways to be a man or to be a boy, and to figure out who you need to be. And it is really about identity, but also it's about the personal struggles, and then how that impacts society as well.
Okay, so what I liked best about the book is that it was so different from my own upbringing that I couldn't even imagine somebody living through the experiences that Tara lived through as a young child. So it opened up to me a whole world that I never knew existed, and made me realize that even in North America, people have to struggle through situations that we can't even comprehend, the situations that they have to put up with.
What I liked best about 1984 was George Orwell's ability to create a totally different world, unlike our own, while at the same time drawing some sort of spooky similarities that might caution us as citizens of the world to make sure that things like this never happen. I think that 1984 acts as a cautionary tale for what happens when government power goes unchecked or unbalanced, and it's really critical for us to understand this in the face of everything that's happening in the world today.